This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. Joining me this week, two sturdy chaps who don't like the way you're looking at me. I'm joined by Brian Murray.
Hello.
And our guest for this episode, Gabe Cheng.
What's all this then, governor?
Oh my gosh, you guys. Okay. I guess before we get things started, I want to remind everybody that we have a hangout on March 20th at 8 p.m. on our Discord. If you're not already there, make sure you join it at ircbpodcast.com/Discord. You can come hang out. We do like a talk show style interview show where I bring people on the audio and we talk about what books you're reading, life, and the universe and everything. So make sure to do that. The other thing I want to talk about is our special guest here, Gabe. Thank you so much for coming back to I Read Comic Books. We're really excited to talk to you. You've got a new Kickstarter coming out. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's called Into the Wilderness. It is a spin-off of my other comic, which is a limited series called For Molly, but it's a standalone. It's a one-shot, so it's you don't need to read For Molly in order to understand what's going on in Into the Wilderness. But Into the Wilderness is about hold on, let me actually bring up the actual log line here. I don't quite have it memorized. After a deadly explosion rocks the New Jersey forest, a talking dog named Caprica and her stoic human partner Schneider go on the hunt for a killer. And it's equal parts hard-boiled detective mystery and classic Western set among a modern fantasy backdrop in the abandoned things in the New Jersey forest, where talking dogs and off-the-grid humans live together in kind of a precarious peace coexistence kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it is coming to Kickstarter on Wednesday, March 17.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this on our public feed, that is today this episode comes out. If you're listening to it on our Patreon feed, it'll be out on Wednesday. I think you can get notified for when those things come out, so maybe I'll post a link to that in the show notes. But yeah, this is really exciting. I read, I think you sent me over the first two issues of For Molly.
Yes.
It's really, really cool series, and you sent over a preview for this Into the Wilderness, which looks beautiful. This is the artist that you worked with on this book is the same one that you worked with on Love Bites, right?
Yeah, Love at First Bite.
Or excuse me, yeah,
That's
sorry,
okay.
Love at First Bite. My apologies. Yeah, that was a super fun little action-packed book that I really enjoyed as well. So this is really cool. So what made you create this little spin-off book? Is this going to be just like a one-shot or a mini-series or something?
Yeah, this is a one-shot. I am working on a collection of short stories, creating my own short story anthology. So this is number 2. The first one was Love at First Bite. Yeah, I'm just really excited to kind of expand the world of For Molly that I created, but not in a way where I'm trying to create my own little universe in there. But I really love these two characters that were part of For Molly. But as it turns out, as I was writing the story and I was coming up with their backstories and I was thinking about what their kind of unique relationship was like, they weren't in For Molly very much. So I was like, okay, that kind of stinks. So I ended up deciding to create this short story to be an addendum to For Molly. Again, it's not a prequel or a sequel or really you don't really need to. It's a standalone, as I said before. So just as a way to kind of explore these characters and expand the universe a little bit, but also as I'll get into with kind of the topics that we're going to be talking about on the show, kind of pay homage to some of the things that I really love in comics itself.
Definitely. Well, I mean, this looks really exciting. I hope the, fingers crossed Kickstarter is going to go well. But yeah, this looks like a beautiful little book. I mean, I love Elisa's, Elisa's art. It's very, like, I don't want to say cartoonish, but it's very, like, it's very action and I love the bold lines, like very bold colors and everything that's done throughout this book, which is a little bit different than For Molly, just in terms of like the style of things. But I don't think that makes it like worse by any means. It actually, I think, adds a lot more diversity to the universe. So I'm really excited for everyone else to check this out as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, Elisa is incredible. I love working with her. She's not only is her art style incredible, but her work ethic is just like beyond reproach. And yeah, it was really fun because For Molly is such a different art style, created by such a different artist whose name is Benjamin Sawyer. It was fun to see it see my story kind of interpreted through another artist's kind of style, which I really, really loved about doing this. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do it with Elisa, because she is so talented, because her style is so cool. It's so fluid, but great expressions and awesome action. And it is kind of like, cartoony is kind of the closest word for it. It's very like this would slot well into an animated show, like almost anyone that you would see.
Definitely.
Like, as far as it looks like it's ripped out of the pages, or, kind of I've been watching the Harley Quinn show this week, so it's kind of like that DC animated style, but a little bit more fluid and European. She's Italian. She lives in Florence, so it's a little bit more European in that sense. But I was just super excited to see her interpret that environment, interpret that story in a completely different art style from Ben's, even though Ben is great.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to have a link to the Kickstarter in the show notes here, so make sure everybody go and check that out. Go make sure to go back it. It's a really fun story from what I've read. So, yeah. Anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about comic books. I've got 2 questions that I'm legally mandated to ask on this show, which is how have you been? How have comic books been? I guess I'm just going to throw it right back to you, Gabe. How have you been? What kind of comics have you been reading?
I've been good. Pandemic good. So
right. That's a good way to. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I have actually not been reading a ton of comics. I have been trying to catch up on some of the things that I have been wanting to read, but because I read digitally, I was having a hard time going from the day job where I was staring at my computer screen to then kind of winding down and relaxing and then staring at my Kindle screen. So trying to cut down on my screen time, I've actually been reading some more paper books. So I just started reading a Stephen King book that's part of the Dark Tower series, The Wind in the Keyhole.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm a Dark Tower reader from way back. So long days and pleasant nights to everybody out there in Midworld. So I've been kind of taking a break from comics just because of screen time. But other than that, I've got the one that I want to talk about in a second, and also my comic book club, we talked about The Eternals by Neil Gaiman, which is what we just recently read, which was pretty good.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, what's the book that you've been reading recently?
The book I've been I just finished reading was the trade collection of Harley and Ivy, because like I said, I've been watching the Harley Quinn show, and I kind of wanted to do a deep dive into that character a little bit. So I'm starting there, and I've bookmarked the Harley Quinn Paul Dini book, the one with the famous cover of the Joker and her, and he's wearing a tuxedo. Oh man, I feel terrible.
Escaping me. I'm so not a Batman nerd enough to know about this.
But yeah, so I wanted to do a deep dive on that character and some of her new stuff, and so that's what I read recently, and I liked it. I have some issues with it, which I can bring up now. Are we?
Yeah, no, go for it. Go for it. Yeah, we'll talk about your book, and then
okay.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Yeah, so it was written by Paul Dini, and the art was done by Bruce Timm, the two of the guys behind the Batman the Animated Series show, which I was a huge fan of growing up. It was really my entry point for Batman. Really, before I was reading comics, I was watching this show. So I binged the Harley Quinn season 1 show. I loved the new take on the character and kind of reframing of the DC universe, where everybody's kind of an extreme version of themselves, kind of in the way that Harley is an extreme version of it kind of already was in that world. But like, I love that Commissioner Gordon is like barely holding on and on the end of his rope, like just, and Clayface, who is an actor, is just totally over the top and can't help but ham it up, and like gets caught in in all these what seems like Who Framed Roger Rabbit type situations to me. But yeah, I really like the take on the characters. But Harley and Ivy's relationship, in my opinion, on that show is really the best part. And I wanted to, like I said, kind of do a deep dive on the origins of that. And I remember the Harley and Ivy episode of the animated show where they kind of go on a road trip, or they go on a crime spree together, which I really, really loved. But the book I really liked because it's kind of the characters in their purest forms before they got on this show. And the story was very cute. It felt like one of the more lighthearted episodes of the show. There were really dark episodes of the show, and then there were really lighthearted ones. And I just love the art style. I love the way that Dini does characters and expressions. Mm-hmm. I know that Elisa kind of my artist takes a lot of cues from that, and which is one of the reasons why I love working with her. Mm-hmm. And so the action layouts were very cool and very simple, but very effective. And honestly, these are the types of things that I'm trying to capture in my own work, specifically in Into the Wilderness, because I was such a huge fan of the animated series. Into the Wilderness is kind of in a lot of ways my homage to Batman the Animated Series. So I was trying to capture that sort of narrative heft and the stylistic tones and the narrative tones that were really part of that show. So the two main characters, Schneider and Caprica, in my comic Into the Wilderness, it is kind of like I said, a unique relationship between the two, because you see a human and a dog, and you think that, the human is because they are older, is going to be the more experienced of the two characters, or the more quote unquote veteran. But I flip that, where the dog Caprica, who is an older dog, she's the one that's kind of showing him the ropes of living out in the New Jersey forest, and being an advocate, which is kind of the peacekeeper core group of people that keep peace between the humans and the dogs. So that kind of unexpected, might be a little bit of a strong word, but unusual kind of mentor and student relationship between a dog and a human was something that I wanted to explore, and that I based on bringing it back to what I was talking about, kind of base it on the Alfred and Bruce relationship in Batman the Animated Series.
Okay.
So
very cool.
Yeah, so I've been challenging myself to write that way. So I found that this was like a fun connection. Even though I just did this in the last week, I just reread it in the last week. It was a fun reconnection in a different way to the Batman the Animated show. I would say that my one big problem with this book, to the point where I might not recommend it to people, the Harley and Ivy book, is that there is like a lot of gratuitous kind of, not quite nudity, because you don't see like anything in particular, but it's not like R-rated, but it is kind of like a little bit gratuitous sexuality, and it there's a couple like unnecessary shower scenes that were like, okay, like this character doesn't need to be like undressing and taking a shower at this point. Like this could have gone without it. It seemed very like male gaze to me, let's make a sexy book, and it didn't have any purpose in the story. So I was like, this is a little bit over the top, and it happened more than once too, which is why I'm saying like I hesitate to kind of recommend it to people, especially if it's like a younger reader or somebody that's getting into comics, because I hate for somebody to read this as their first book and be like, is this like every book is just going to have unnecessary shower scenes in it? Like,
right. Or they're going to be like, does every book have unnecessary shower scenes in it?
Going the other direction. And then they'll be so disappointed when they read my book.
So the Caprica shower scene, that's not coming down the pipe.
No.
Yeah. Oh my God.
All right, I'll temper my expectations.
Well, everybody knows what it's like to try to get a dog into the bath. So
Right.
That's its own spin-off of this spin-off in its own, trying to get Caprica to bathe.
Well, cool. Well, Brian, how about you? How have comic books been? What have you been reading? And how are you? I guess I should also ask that.
Yeah, I've been good. Kate and I have been painting my bedroom the past week or so. So I've actually been sleeping in the basement, which is a real return to form for me. Comics-wise, I've actually done a lot of reading in the past couple of weeks. I finally buckled down and read all of the Star Wars trades available on Hoopla. So I read volumes 3 through 10, because I stopped after volume 2 originally.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot that I like about this series. It's one of those things where I think that as a Star Wars fan, I am so conditioned to like these things that I don't really have an issue with it. But I don't know. The thing that really got me was there's this sort of like Spec Ops Stormtrooper squad called Scar Squad, and I'm just, whenever you have like a uniform soldier type, but then you get like special versions of that armor, there's something about that like ticks my dopamine centers, because these guys, like, one of them has a lightsaber. One of them is just big. I think he's big and shoots rockets. Okay,
nice.
I don't know, because we don't really get a whole lot of time with them, but I love them. They make me think a lot of the Bad Batch Clone Wars spinoff that's coming in May, which I'm very excited for.
I completely agree with like the variant on things. Like whenever there's a slight change in something that you're so used to seeing in the status quo of a character design or something like that, where you're like, oh, cool, like that is very exciting.
Yeah, like one of them has like a glowing blue visor. It's don't know what it does, but it's rad.
It's very cool, and I want the toy of it.
Yeah. Oh god, you could sell so many action figures off these clowns. Speaking of clowns, I also read Harleen, the Stepan Sajic.
Oh, nice.
Harley Quinn book. I mean, gorgeous, first of all, obviously. The man's work is simply outstanding. I thought it was good. There's a certain degree to which I'd rather shut my hand in a car door than read another Joker story. And as much as this book was about Harley Quinn, it's impossible to tell the Harley Quinn origin story without spending a lot of time on the Joker.
Right.
And I think he sucks, and I'm sick of hearing about him.
I had a similar... We read that book a couple months ago in my comic book club. I had a similar reaction. I came into the comic book club, and I was like, what do we all think of Sexy Joker, guys? And with any Harley origin story, it's hard to not really have to make the leap, where it's like it is, in a lot of ways, if it's not done really well, it's hard to get the reader to go along with you on like, oh, okay, she fell in love with a psychopath. It didn't quite hit it for me in the Harleen book as well. So I agree with you that like the Joker part of it was, it wasn't anything that we've necessarily hadn't seen before, which is one of the reasons why I kind of bumped up against it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think that the logical leap from being, mild-mannered, albeit troubled psychologist to being a criminal mastermind psychopath, I don't know if that was the best version of that story for me.
Yeah, I think that if we had gotten something where everybody around her was always telling her like the Joker is this like vicious psychopath, but then all of her interactions with him were in a way innocent or something like that, we could really get into the weird gaslighty nature of their relationship, where like she begins to think maybe he's not this monster, instead of what she comes around to is he's a monster and he's hot.
Yeah,
I guess.
And also there's not to spoil it, but there's a whole kind of Two-Face element to the story where Harvey Dent is in it, and I that part was just like, that part seemed very rushed to me, and I was like, oh, we're shoehorning Two-Face into this. Like,
that's interesting. Yeah,
it was not my favorite part of it, where it seemed like, okay, we need, again, I don't want to spoil it, but like we need this X, Y, or Z element in here. Let's use Two-Face and like we can make him kind of a sped up version of that story.
Yeah, it's like there was like a quota of Batman elements they had to meet.
Yeah.
And so you have to occasionally like, we got to get Batman in there. It's been 25 pages since we last saw Batman. And name drop Edward Nygma while you're at it. Don't talk about the Riddler. Just the fans will know.
Yeah, interesting. So should I read this Harleen book? Is that what you're saying? Because I've been on the edge about it, because I've been reading the Harley Quinn Black, White, and Red. I didn't know this was going to be the Harley Quinn episode, but it turns out it is. I've been reading Harley Quinn Black, White, and Red, and I've loved almost every single issue of it. So like, Gabe, if you're looking for more very close stories to the Harley Quinn TV show, like highly recommend that series.
I will
it's like
put
digital
that on
run.
my Hoopla for sure. That sounds good.
It's amazing. But yeah, should I read this Harleen book, Brian?
So I think that it's worth the read. If nothing else, again, just to marvel at the artwork.
Right.
Just I guess it is not quite the fresh new take on the Harleen Quinzel backstory that I wanted it to be.
Gotcha.
I 100% agree. I think it's a cool story. It's a modern story, I would say. It's not the kind of abridged version that we got in some other ones, where it just goes from like panels of her talking to like Suicide Squad, the movie, essentially, where it's like like a scene of her talking to the Joker, and then she's jumping into the chemicals, right? Mm-hmm. The art is really, really cool. I did marvel at a couple of like, wow, he really got 16 panels on one page or something like that, where it's like he really like there's really a lot of cool art, but it wasn't quite as like the fresh new take that Brian, you said it better than I'm saying it now. But anyway, I agree with what Brian said.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Like, this will probably end up in my cart at some point on Comixology, so that's good to know. Well, as for me, I've been doing okay. I am currently in the process of trying to figure out how I'm going to move in a couple of weeks, because I'm moving to New Jersey. So, Gabe, I'm going to watch out for Forrest.
State,
will not be talking to dogs. Not going to be talking to dogs in New Jersey. But yeah, so I've been trying to mentally like Tetris out everything that I have in my tiny little apartment to figure out how it's going to move there. But other than that, I've been reading a couple of books, mostly just Hikaru no Go. Been catching up on that because we're reading that on the Discord. But I did read a couple single issues. X Factor #8. This is by Leah Williams with pencils and inks by David Baldion, colors by Israel Silva, letters by Joe Carmagna. Scaramagna. I can never say his name right. The TLDR of this issue is Boneyard's haunted. Place called Boneyard, probably going to be haunted, but turns out it is haunted. And I don't know what it is about X Factor, but it grows on me every single month that it comes out. Like every other issue seems to be like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but we're still going forward. So it's really weird because some of the issues are really clunky. Like I think issue number 7, I really was not pleased by, but then issue number 8, I love to death. I don't know what is happening with Leah Williams' writing, but every time I read one of her books, I feel like I love it more and more. So I'm all on board for this book. Obviously, it's an X-Men book, and that's like my jam, but I really, really liked what happened in issue 8, and I can't talk about it at all because it's a huge spoiler for everything. But X Factor is slowly becoming like one of the top tier X-Men books that are coming out right now, up there with Hellions at number 1, with New Mutants at number 2. So yeah, maybe X Factor's at sitting at number 3 for me. I can't really be certain, but yeah, I've been loving what's happening with this series, especially the latest issue. So I really like that Leah Williams is pulling in, like she's got more Eye-Boy, more Daken growth, more Polaris being fed up with bullshit, more development with Siren's quote unquote thing, and I don't want to spoil it. Small pieces of Rachel's story, Ron Wolfsbane is getting this whole side story as well. More Prodigy stuff. All the characters in this book, we're seeing immense growth. Somehow she managed to pack in a ton of growth for all of the characters in this latest issue, and I just love it to death. The other book I do want to talk about really quick is Chaos Agent number 1. This is by a friend of the show, Dennis Camp. Pencils and inks by Filia Bratuki. Colors by Jason Wordie. Letters by Hassan Otsman Elhau. This book is out in June, so you can't really get it right now. I happen to get a preview of it because Dennis is very, very nice. And I will say no spoilers on this book, but every single person out there who wants a wild and crazy story that is just going to break your mind while also having a lot of fun should check out this book. It reminds me of some of the crazier shit that Grant Morrison's done. If you like some of the crazier shit that the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, his name I can't think of, Gerard Way has done, some of his crazier shit that he's done with Umbrella Academy. If you like, which again, homages back to Grant Morrison, a lot of the stuff that you would see in like the crazier Doom Patrol stuff, the Invisibles. I know that Warren Ellis is kind of a shithead / is a shithead, but some of his crazier stuff that he did with Gravel, if you like those kinds of stories, this book is for you. I think that Camp has basically spent the last year cramming the most insane shit into one 4-issue miniseries, and that's what we're going to see with Chaos Agent. Bratuki's art is so fucking detailed. Like think of James Stocco, think of Frank Quietly, think of Juan Jose Rip. Those artists don't have anything on this guy Batuki. I've never seen anything that he's done before, but like every single page was filled with 1,000,001 lines, and I know that that's not some people's jam, but for me, I just was in awe by the amount of detail in this book. I really, really liked it in terms of just looking at it. The color palette is insane. Jason Wordie does a great job of really bending your mind inside the world of this book. Just with colors alone, there's some beautiful splashes that he did, or that he worked with, obviously with Bratuki to make happen, but just like the color choices for some of the pages were really wild, and definitely like puts you in a state of unease in a really, really good way. So yeah, this feels like a mad dash to the future that was created with the intent to be bizarre and extremely out there, with a dash of grounded story to keep everything together. Yeah, the TLDR of the story is Philip is an agent of the world, WORLDE, some huge time-traveling organization. They're trying to stop the world from ending. But imagine if some of the most insane conspiracy theories or ideas or crock comic book ideas actually came to life, and these people have to stop them. So yeah, it's really, really good. Everyone should go pre-order it. I cannot express it enough how much I love this first issue. And I have a copy of the second issue. I haven't read it yet, but number 1 was amazing. So go pre-order that on Diamond or pre-order on Comixology, wherever you get your comic books.
Yeah, the art, I just looked it up on Sci-Fi Wire. The art looks really super duper cool. This is the first time I've heard of this comic, but man, I love this kind of art style, and the colors are really awesome, at least in the preview, as far as kind of the vibrant but still kind of muted tones. But yeah, I love the kind of squiggly but still jagged, multiple just like patchwork of lines. Like yeah, that's Yeah, I'm really interested, and it's a Scout comic, which Scout is just like is just killing it right now.
I feel like every week I find another book and I'm just like, holy shit, that's from Scout Comics. Maybe I'll have to check that out. Like, they're blowing up in a really, really good way. I think a lot of really interesting books have come out from them recently, and this is another one that's coming out in June. Let's move on, though. Let's talk about comic books that are coming out on, I have the wrong date, I think, in my document, on March 17, 2021. Before I guess let's jump back to Brian. What are you excited for this upcoming week really quick?
Yeah, this week I'm looking forward to Radiant Black #2. I read issue #1 off a recommendation on the show. This is written by Kyle Higgins with art by Marcelo Costa. I really liked the first issue. I'm a sucker for that like average schlub gets superpowers trope. The fact that he is a failed writer in insurmountable debt really hit home to me. But yeah, there's a lot of mysteries in this book. You know, like how many of these weird artifacts are there? Who made them? Why are they here? What do all the other ones do? There's a lot of questions to answer, and I think that if they do actually answer them, this could be a really engaging mystery.
Agreed. I like #1 enough to try #2, even though it wasn't my favorite book in the world. But I'm intrigued enough to keep going. Gabe, what about you? Do you have any books you're excited for this upcoming week?
Well, I hate to be that guy, but
Nothing.
No, worse. I'm going to plug my own book, Into
okay.
the Wilderness, coming out on Wednesday on Kickstarter. Very excited to get the campaign started. Lots of cool rewards, and yeah, just I've already kind of talked about it at the top of the show, but I would appreciate everybody going and please checking that out. I'm very proud of this book, and I am very happy with all the work that Elisa did, and yeah, it's part of a. Oh, I did forget to mention that, you know, I talked a bunch about For Molly and stuff like that, but so if you haven't read For Molly, once the campaign hits its goal, every backer at every level will get digital copies of For Molly 1 through 3. So if you haven't read For Molly, but you want to check out Into the Wilderness, you will get the chance to read For Molly either when the Kickstarter funds.
Awesome. That's super exciting. Well, again, there's a link to this in the show notes. Make sure you go check it out. I'm sure I can say I've read I think the whole first issue or the whole issue of this. It's fantastic. But cool. Yeah. So I guess for me, before we get into things, you know, it's 2021. We're doing wild stuff. We're giving away $20 gift card. You mentioned the show on social media. We'll give you a $20 gift card. If you know, we'll raffle it off essentially if there's multiple people. But make sure you mention us on social media, share the show. It really, really helps us. We can't express thanks enough to everyone who's done it so far. Our picks from the folks on Discord that we have this week: Cinco is excited for The Expanse #4. Danny is excited for Nightwing #78. People still read Nightwing? I'm just okay. Just kidding. I know a lot of people read Nightwing. Please don't come at me, Nightwing fans. The book that I'm excited for this week is Ultramega #1. This is written and drawn by James Herron, who also did a book called Rumble from Image a while ago. This is from Skybound, which is an imprint in Image. Colors by Dave Stewart. The description says that it's basically like Kaiju meets Extremity, which if anybody read Daniel Warren Johnston's Extremity, one of the best 12-issue series I read in a very long time, like up there probably with Mr. Miracle, The Vision. Like I'm telling you guys, like it's an amazing 12-issue series. I liked that a lot. I liked a lot of what I read of Rumble. So I'm game to try this. I feel like Kaijus are slowly but surely coming back. I don't know what it is. I love the series Kaiju #8 from Shonen Jump /Viz. If you haven't read that, what are you doing with your life? Kaiju #8 is probably one of the coolest like kaiju manga that you can read. So yeah, whatever James Herron has, I'm willing to try this book. Ultramega, just the preview art alone looks wild and insane. The cover is going to dominate the bookshelves, your Comixology homepage. I think just because of how stark it is and how beautiful it looks. So yeah, I'm super game to try this Ultramega #1. It looks really, really exciting. Plus kaiju, right? I feel like Brian's ears perked up when I said kaiju. So
I mean, Netflix just dropped their Pacific Rim anime.
Oh, right.
So I've got kaiju on the brain right now for sure.
Yeah. So that's what I'm excited for. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about comic books that got us really hooked on the medium. We're going to go back to everyone's origin story about comic books, and then we're going to, talk about what keeps us reading comic books. We've done this a little bit before, but you don't really know everybody's true origin story. So we'll be back in just a second. For our our show this week, we are talking about comics that really got us hooked on the medium. I mean, this could be the first comic you ever read. Maybe it was a comic that you read 2 years ago and you've been just putzing around on this comic book thing for a decade, and now it finally clicked for you. So I'm curious to know, Brian, I've known you for quite a long time, but Gabe, I've only known you for a short time. So I guess to get things started, what's one of the books that really got you into comic books where you said, like, yes, I get it, I want to read more of these things?
Well, I've told a lot of people I'm a late bloomer when it comes to comics. I had a couple of comics growing up, Batman comics around the time that I was watching the animated series, the Justice League and the Superman animated series, but I didn't really get into reading as heavily as I did until college, and that was when I first read Watchmen, which I'm sure is an entry point for a lot of people as well. So that was the one that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, okay, it's not just about superheroes. It can have a lot of very thoughtful themes and very kind of dark and tragic and what word am I looking for? Because I wouldn't say that like that Watchmen is like very very innovative as far as the art, but it had a specific style. So stylized was the word I was looking for. Sorry.
Sure.
Because it had the 9-panel thing and the splash pages and going back and forth between the kind of graphic novel and kind of a traditional novel with some of the other documents that were in there as well. Like, so that was a big eye opener for me. And then after that, it wasn't until I read Batman: The Long Halloween that I was like, oh, like this is what I was looking for. Like these are the kind of stories I was really looking for that I had really loved when I was a kid watching the animated show, and but were more grown up, were more kind of in depth, and yeah, I just love everything about that book, The Long Halloween. It's probably the comic that I've read the most times. I have a signed copy of it.
Oh, wow.
Jeff Loeb signed it. And so I got it through a friend of a friend because a coworker of mine, her best friend, was his personal assistant for many years. So it went through the grapevine and came back to me with his signature on it. And I got it like sometime in the spring. So his signature said like, "Hey, Gabe, happy holidays, Jeff Loeb." And I was like, "Happy holidays? I don't get it." And then I had to make that connection in my head because I hadn't read it in a while. I was like, oh, because of the calendar, and it's happening on the holidays and all the murders, of course. So I felt stupid in that moment, but it is a great little note that he put on there. And then
that's really cool.
Yeah. And then the other book that got me was Hush, which is the kind of spiritual follow up to that book. It was written by Jeff Loeb, but art was done by Jim Lee, and that was the one where it like that. I mean, Jim Lee, like his art is just astounding, and it has its style also. Not that that's the only way that you can do astounding art, because there's so many different art styles out there. But but reading that as a novice comic book reader, we were just like, wow, I was just blown away by that art, and I love Jeff Loeb's writing style, and just everything about those two books are really like will always have kind of a special place in my heart as my gateway drugs for comics.
Oh, for sure. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, you basically listed like 3 home run comic books. I mean, I totally understand how books like that could definitely like say like, oh, I want to read a million more of these things because of how fantastic those are. So I totally get that. I mean, we talk a lot of shit about Watchmen just because of how overhyped it can be sometimes. But like at the same time, like you can't get away from the fact of what Watchmen was for its time and how impactful it is in general to comic books. So like, totally understand it. Yeah,
and I think that it's totally legitimate for I wouldn't necessarily say like, oh, Watchmen is the most important comic book of all time. It's like sure. Like I mean, it is important in that like if you read comics, you should probably have at least attempted to read it, just like because it is part of like the zeitgeist, and like it's going to be referenced in other comics, and people that you encounter are going to have read it, so they will they will know things about it, and like it's part of the our shared literacy kind of. But as far as like you haven't read any comics, you have to read Watchmen, you have to read this first. Right. Put down everything else before you read Watchmen. It's like, no, there's a lot of great stuff out there.
Right.
I think that our issues with Watchmen is never really with Watchmen so much as it is with those who proselytize Watchmen.
True.
Yeah.
True.
It's not a perfect book. It's a great book. but it's not like a perfect book. I agree.
Yeah. If you don't like Watchmen, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with
Exactly. And that's why I said, like, you should have at least attempted it. Like, you don't have to finish it or even liked it, but like, yeah. I agree.
But no, I totally understand, because like I think when I read Watchmen, you know, as you do eventually, someone puts it in front of you and that big yellow cover hits your face and you go, maybe I should look at this thing. And I remember being floored by it. I remember being super overwhelmed by it, but I still really loved it.
Yeah.
So like I said, I totally get it. Those are some like I said, home run picks for books that got you hooked. Brian, what about you? What are some of the books that got you like really hooked on comics?
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that like my whole intro to comics just came from living with Mike in college. We literally had like one of those revolving wire racks in the kitchen of the trailer that we rented in college that Mike kept trades on. So it was an adapt or die situation.
Our actual whole entire place was like overflowing with comic books because I had so many and we just needed places to put them. And so anytime it's just like, you know, they're out there, so go ahead and pick one up if you want.
Wow. How did you guys how are your like lower backs doing now that I can barely lift the comics that I currently have to move them. I can't. I'm just astounded by people that have huge collections, because it's like wow, you're really into lifting heavy things.
Well, I mean, I made the switch from long boxes to short boxes many years ago, so it's a lot of short trips, you know.
Yeah.
And I see a chiropractor every 2 weeks, so so not great, Gabe. That's the answer.
I feel you.
But one of the books that I pulled out of Mike's giant stack of long boxes was Peter David's X Factor. And that was like the first time that I read like a big 2 book, because before that, you know, I guess I had read Watchmen by that point, but it was mostly just like, I think that I'd been reading the IDW D&D comics for a little while at that point, because huge D&D nerd, I had to. But X Factor was the first like ongoing big 2-ish book that I got into, and I was just sort of enamored with Jamie Madrox and all the multiple men that were running around. Also introduced Darwin, who is still my favorite like mutant, I think. The guy whose entire power is not dying, even though the movie still found a way, I guess.
Yeah.
They took the one black man character whose whole power is not being able to die and still found a way to kill him off.
Right.
Not to get on my soapbox about that too much, but it was some bullshit.
Yeah.
Cinco in Discord is pointing out that Darwin might be from Deadly Genesis. That could be. X Factor is just like where I first encountered Darwin.
Right.
So I guess I did not state that clearly.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of my, it still is like probably one of my favorite long X-Men runs. I mean, that book ran for like 10 years or something. I mean, I think the opening bit of that book where Jamie is just like, you know, at one point I had sent a bunch of my dupes to just go live their own lives. And I knew that when they came back, I'd just be able to absorb their information. And then it becomes a matter of, I don't know where a lot of these dupes went. And some of them just keep coming back and it's bad. I think it's such a goofy concept, but man, what a book to get you hooked on things. I think Peter David has a really interesting writing style, despite, you know, some of the problems that people have with him, and just some of the things he's done outside of comics and said outside of comics that are not so great. But I mean, I think his X Factor run is stupendous. Like, it's still one of those, of all of the single issue comics that I've kept over my multiple moves over the years. I think that's one of the series that I've kept every single issue of, and it's a 10-year long run, so it's a lot of issues.
Yeah. What about you, Mike? What you're the seed that grew this whole podcast. How'd you get started?
Well, I mean, I'm certain that I've told the story about how I got into comics in the first place. It was on a whim. Like, I was younger and a friend of mine was like insistent, like I think we were like 16. He was insistent on buying me a comic book or buying me a birthday present. And I was like, dude, we are 16. Neither of us have any money. Don't buy me anything. And we were walking through Barnes and Noble. He's like, I want to get you something. I was like, okay, well, here, give me this. And so I grabbed a random volume of Uncanny X-Men off of the wall, off of the Barnes and Noble shelf. I had the Phoenix on the cover of it, and I was like, sure, let's do this. It was volume 2 of Uncanny X-Men Masterworks, which was like a mistake. So he bought this for me, and I took it home, and I was like, oh, it's in the middle of a story. Oh, this is volume 2. And I went back and I bought volume 1, and it kind of got me hooked. It made me curious about the X-Men, because it doesn't start with like X-Men number 1. It starts with giant size X-Men number 1, where you meet Nightcrawler and Colossus and Cyclops, I think, is in the group. There's a couple, and Banshee. And yeah, I was like, oh, I actually know all these characters from the arcade game. So I was interested in that, but I really don't think I got hooked on comics where I like wanted to do it and read it all the time until I read Ultimate Spider-Man. I picked up Barnes & Noble because Barnes & Noble is where I lived in the Midwest whenever I was at the mall, because that's all you can do is go to the mall. And I picked up this 6-in-1 collection of Ultimate Spider-Man. It had volumes 1 through 6 of Ultimate Spider-Man. I was like, this looks cool. It looks like it's the beginning of a story, because I was constantly hunting for like the actual beginning of some of these superhero comics. And since the Ultimate Universe was like a brand new thing, I was like, all right, let's try this. This seems like it's brand new. It says the origin of Spider-Man. Like, let's do it. So this is Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley's Ultimate Spider-Man. So, like, of course I was hooked. Like, how do you not get hooked on Ultimate Spider-Man by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley? I'm sure there's somebody listening going, well, that run wasn't very good. To which I say, shut up. It was very good. I mean, I love this. And then I found out, I ended up looking up, like, what is this Ultimates thing? Turns out, like, in the back of these books, because I didn't think to look on the internet for stuff. It turns out, like, in the back of this book, they're like, oh, if you like this, you can read The Ultimates number 1, volume 1, which is by Mark Millar and someone who I can't remember. And then there's Ultimate X-Men and Ultimate Fantastic Four. And I was like, I got to get all these things. So with my part-time job, all I did was spend all my money on like donuts and candy and then these comic books. And so like, I got really into the Ultimates, got really into Ultimate X-Men. I was just buying collections. I didn't understand when collections would come out, so I was just checking Barnes & Noble's website like every other week to see when they would, or I wouldn't even check their website. I would go to the store like once a week to try to see when the next volume would come out. So yeah, I got really hooked onto the Ultimate Universe. And I mean, at the time, I was also checking out like other stuff. Like I heard about this Sin City thing. It's like a short little thing. And then I read like the first volume of it. And then I was like, oh, they have all connected covers. And so if you buy all 7, you can put them on your shelf and you can see Nancy dancing on a table in a cowboy bikini. Cause I didn't understand what that was. I just thought that I thought it was cool that the covers connected. Yeah. So it was like between the Ultimate stuff and the Frank Miller Sin City, I got really, really into like that side of comics. Like Frank Miller stuff I thought was amazing, so of course I bought his Batman and all that stuff, but I genuinely owned every single Ultimates comic book volume from across the board up through the beginning of when they all started to Ultimatum. When it got to Ultimatum, I hated it so much that I stopped buying the collections. Yeah, the Ultimate stuff really, really got me hooked on comics. And then I realized that it was all offshoots of the 616 universe. Then I started touching on other stuff, but like Ultimates really, really got me hyped to the point where I was carrying around the 6-volume collection in my backpack, going to school and reading it during class. Like I would sit in the back of class and I would read comic books, and it was all these Ultimate comic books because I thought it was so cool. But yeah, I like that idea of like getting it on the ground floor, and I really wanted to start at the beginning of a story. And that, I mean, I still have that mentality to this day, but I've learned to roll with the punches more with like big 2 books and stuff and just kind of say, well, I don't know what that is. That's fine. Let's just move on. So yeah, long-winded, but like the Ultimate comic books really got me into things. I don't know if you guys have ever read like Ultimate Spider-Man or the Ultimates or Ultimate X-Men, but yeah, it's pretty good stuff, at least in the beginning.
I should read it. I haven't read a lot of Spider-Man, and I haven't read a lot of the Ultimate stuff, but I have read Bendis's run on Daredevil, and I love it. And I know that that's controversial as well because people have feelings about Bendis, but I like Bendis. So yeah, that is something that I would want to jump into.
Yeah, I feel like it was a fresh take. I mean, everyone's take on Spider-Man is fresh, but like I feel like, starting Spider-Man as like a 16-year-old kid and the way he changed up the Goblin and a lot of the supervillains, like you go into that book, I think, with preconceived notions of what the universe is because you know who Spider-Man is, you know who Mysterio is and the Great Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus and all this stuff, and then Bendis and Bagley, working together, I think did a good job of twisting their origins and changing the characters enough to where you go, oh, this is really interesting. And then they wrote the greatest relationship ever. I think Bendis did a really good job of making Peter Parker and Kitty Pryde having this will they, won't they thing in the story. It was probably one of the best relationships I read in comics. I don't think I was into romance in comics until I read that relationship. Like when they had this will they, won't they thing between the two of them. It was great.
That sounds so much like a fan fiction.
Yes.
Like, Spider-Man and Kitty Pryde.
Well, I mean, in continuity, let me push up my glasses. Technically, in the story, they were the same age, so it wasn't weird.
That's funny that you say it sounds like a fan fiction. It really sounds like a Bendis to me, where it's like that kind of relationship, like tense relationships bouncing off of each other because they really like have some sort of fundamental thing that unites them or divides them. Like that's very Bendis to me. So that was my reaction.
Definitely. I mean, and that's the story, right? Like Kitty Pryde is torn because she really likes Peter, but she also has this alliance to the X-Men, and the X-Men in the Ultimate Universe are very much like, don't talk to other mutants, don't hang out with other mutants, or non-mutants, I should say, because like they understand like there's a persecution there, and Xavier's a little bit more militant than in the 616 universe, or at least he's more, I guess, like obvious about his militancy than in the 616 universe. But yeah, so Kitty very much having this like, I can't really do this, Peter, and Peter being like, but I like you a lot. It's a very fun read. I mean, I have fond memories of this. I think I read this when it was, years ago, and it was still fresh, but I wonder if going back and rereading all of Ultimate Spider-Man would be a good thing or a very bad thing for my memories, because I have very fond memories of like the whole Ultimate Universe, good and bad. I'll never forgive Robert Kirkman for basically destroying the Ultimate X-Men, but it's neither here nor there.
What I think is interesting, I don't know if we're running out of time, but like in all of our origins, and then Cinco on Discord said, I didn't mention it, but like it involves Barnes and Noble and not NLCS, a local comic shop. So because when I first started reading, because I didn't really know where to get comics, I would just go to Barnes and Noble and pick up stuff off the shelf, and or borrow stuff from a friend of mine who was essentially doing the same. And because for a short time, I was going to a local comic shop when I was living in Orange County, and I live in LA now, but I haven't really picked that up again. And I know that like it's a very different experience. And I'm not sure if I have a question here. I just thought it was kind of interesting that's how we came into it. And have you guys started going to local comic shops? Like, have you participated in things that are happening at local comic shops? Like, what's been your experience since starting in Barnes and Noble?
That's a great question. Brian, maybe I'll let you take this first.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely grew up deep in the suburbs, so the nearest comic shop to me was, I think, like 7 or 8 miles, which was a lot to bike.
Yeah,
especially because there was the shop owner was a real character. If you're familiar with Chick Tracts at all,
brother.
Big proponent of the Jack Chick.
Oh, I don't know what that is,
tracts.
but
is
we'll it a
tell you after the
TNA
show.
thing?
No, it's a super religious thing.
Yeah, it's a D&D is devil worship, and you're all going to hell kind of thing.
Yeah, you say that, and I know exactly what comic book shop you're talking about, because I think it was the second comic shop I'd ever gone to before I really started buying comics. But go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, but what I was pretty close to was the Rivertown Crossings Mall, or I guess not so much that I was close to it, but my mom would go there a lot, and if I wanted to get anything, I had to go with her, and then I would hang out in the Barnes and Noble in the mall while she did whatever moms do. So yeah, I spent a lot of time, like sitting on the floor in the comics and manga section, because that's just what you did back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I mean for me, yeah, like, I got my start basically reading comics by going to Barnes and Noble because I didn't know where else to get them. It wasn't until college that I was like really, really getting into comics, and like it was to the point where I was like, well, I'm tired of waiting for trades to come out. When do these things actually come out, right? And this is me just doing blind Google searches of just like it was my freshman year. I remember looking just like, when do comic books come out? And then I found a schedule. It's like, oh, well, movies come out on Fridays and albums come out on Tuesdays and comic books come out on Wednesdays. And I was like, who chose this? I don't know how this was designed. I just remember being very confused, but also excited because now I knew when they came out. And then you do a Google search, like comic book shop near me. And I found a couple, but they were like way into the city because the college that I went to was not close to a city. So it was like, 35, 45 minutes to get there. But like I didn't have a car. So I was like, well, how do you take a bus? The bus system in the city was not very great for where we grew up or where I was going to college and stuff like that. And so, yeah, but long story short, I did end up going. And I met this old curmudgeon of a man who ran the shop. And he was an old curmudgeon of a man, but I have very fond memories of him. And he just was, okay, buying comics. Okay, cool. And he just rung me up, didn't ask me anything, didn't talk to me. I had to find all my own stuff. I didn't know what to do, and I'm too nervous to actually ask questions because I'm in a comic book shop and I didn't want anybody to think that I didn't know what I was doing, But yeah, after that, like that ended up being my regular comic book shop, all things considered. And I'd tried a couple of other places, like the one that Brian mentioned. I'd been to that place, didn't have a good time. I remember getting real side-eyed by this guy for wanting this X-Men book. It was Uncanny X-Men by Chuck Austin, for anyone who's listening. And it has Nightcrawler on the cover, and they were selling it, but he was just like, this is about the devil, right? And I was like, thank you. And he insisted that me and my friends all take these chick tracts as well when we left. And I think mine was about, the one that I got was about masturbation and how like you'll die if you touch yourself or something. I don't know. But yeah,
I've so many thoughts about that.
Seriously, do a Google search for Jack Chick, I think it's CHICK, and you'll find chick tracks. They're a whole thing, and it is not great. But they're still comic books technically. But yeah, so after that, like, I graduated. I started going to this comic shop like every Wednesday, every other Wednesday, to the point where I had a big, decent sized pull from this place, and I would end up talking to the comic shop owners and stuff. And then over time, I moved from that comic shop to another comic book shop that opened up that was a little bit more friendly, had a lot more selection. And then, yeah, up until probably about a year and a half ago, like literally like 2 months before the pandemic hit, I just was like, I can't keep buying comic books because I have nowhere to store them, at least single issues. And so I stopped and I went completely digital, and I was still like going to or pre-ordering books, like collections from comic shops. Like there's one that's pretty close to me that's walking distance in Brooklyn. Yeah, like I haven't participated in like the active comic book shop experience in a long time, because like I used to get single issues from Midtown Comics. That's not really a personal experience. When you go there, you're not going to end up being friends with the people at the shop.
Right.
The people that go to the shop aren't actually like your friends. They're just like strangely businessmen and like tourists that are buying comic books that week. So yeah, it's weird. I hope that in the future, that I can, if I have a little bit more room, I can go to a comic book shop more regularly to pick up like a book a week or something, just to like get back into that experience. Because I feel like I really miss that. I miss that idea of making every Wednesday a special thing that you go out and you do as like a ritual in a lot of ways, of like, I'm going to get my comics and then I'm going to come home and either I'm going to read them right then or I'm going to let them pile up for 3 or 4 weeks and then read them all some Saturday. So yeah, I don't know. That's my long-winded answer there, I guess. I just, because I understand that idea of like graduating or moving up from just going to Barnes & Noble to a local shop, but yeah, I don't know. It's strange, right? Because we want to support the comic book industry, but at the same time, we don't necessarily have all the room for this type of stuff. So like it's I don't know. I have a back and forth about it all the time.
Yeah, that's my thing as well. And also like it does add up. It does get expensive. Whereas I can read it on Hoopla for free.
Yeah.
So going week after week, even though you want to support the local comic book shops, it does become a bit of a challenge. And I'm not much of a collector as well. Like I'm not kind of in the market for things like that, even for toys, right, or art or things like that. So it's hard for me to justify going, despite the fact that I do really want to, like, I'd love to be a part of a local comic shop community. Like I'd love to, have that kind of Cheers experience where it's like you go in and everybody that's coming in on Wednesdays, and like you have a conversation about this or that, and you have a relationship with the owner and all the people behind the counter. Like I would really like that. I would really like to kind of have that interaction with people, but it's for me, it's cost prohibitive, and and also the pandemic, and it's hard to find a good one that aren't going to sell you ones about how Satan and the Pope and Dungeons and Dragons are evil and things like that. I Google searched chick tracts and I scrolling through the Wikipedia. I love the first line for the entry and controversy section is: the Southern Poverty Law Center has designated chick publications as an active hate group. The group was listed due to its strong anti-Catholic, anti-Muslim, and anti-homosexual rhetoric. It's like, all right, cool. Sounds like some fun comics, guys.
Right.
What a trifecta.
See, nowadays you can only get comics like that on Indiegogo. Sorry. That's fine. Okay, well, I guess... any last thought? I don't know if there's any other books you guys wanted to bring up. I had like a couple other books that I just really quick that I wanted to mention, like Invincible and Walking Dead were other books that really got me excited about non-big two books. I think it really started to broaden my horizons about things. So I can't, as much as I was frustrated with Robert Kirkman for destroying the Ultimate X-Men, I still went and read his two biggest books, and I read them to death. Like I read every single issue that I could get my hands on, with the exception of Walking Dead. I did fall off around like issue like 115 or something, but nonetheless, I read them for a very long time. And the last one would be Fonte Bukowski, which is, I know not everybody's favorite, totally understand it. It's a book from Fantagraphics that we had it on the book club reading challenge last year. This was one of those first like out there books that I read. I snagged it one day when Paul and I were hanging out because he came to visit in New York, just to be in New York, not to come see me. We're friends, but and it was very odd and off-putting, and it really opened my eyes to like out there kind of strange original graphic novels that like you just kind of got to take a chance on things and maybe it'll turn out good. And I ended up really liking that one. So those books really opened my eyes to the broader spectrum of comic books in a lot of ways. That's pretty much it for me. I don't know, Brian, was there anything else that you had on your list?
Just that of all things, the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl was the comic that made me start a pull list at my local comic shop.
Nice.
I was just so enamored by that first issue that I was like, I can't just wait for this. I have to read it as it's coming out. So I went down to the LCS and paced around, working up the nerve to actually talk to the people behind the counter. And then...
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess I think that covers everything, at least everything I have in my notes. Well, yeah, I guess, Gabe, thank you so much for being on the show with us this week. This was so much fun.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, and where can people find the Kickstarter? I guess and all that stuff, let's make sure they get it reminded one more time.
Yeah, the Kickstarter is, if you just go to Kickstarter and search Into the Wilderness, it will come up. We are launching on March 17, and we are ending on March 31st. And if you can find me at Gabe Cheng Comics, GABECHE as an echo, NG Comics. And then that's on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to GabeChengComics.com. On Facebook, it is For Molly Comic is where I post all my stuff. And yeah, that's kind of where it is. I'm like I said, this is my fifth Kickstarter, my second short story, kind of overlapping my strategies on Kickstarter, where I'm just about to close my limited series, but just starting up with my short story anthology. Mm-hmm. Very proud of this book. All the pages are completely done. And yeah, I'm really excited about this book, and I'm really proud of it. So that's coming out Wednesday, March 17th.
And you also have a podcast that you record as well.
Yes, I keep forgetting that when I go on podcast.
I mean, listen, you're a man of many talents, and a podcast is just one more thing. I get it; it's totally understandable.
Yeah, and what's funny is that my brother is listening to all the podcasts that I'm doing as part of promoting the Kickstarter, and like every time I've now forgotten to promote the podcast that he and I host together. So. I'm sure he's very happy with me. But yeah, my podcast is called Another Lousy Millennium. It is a bi-weekly fan podcast for Futurama, the animated show. So we go episode by episode talking about each episode of Futurama. And we've actually are coming up to the end of the series, and we are going to be doing over 140 episodes of Another Lousy Millennium. Talking, analyzing, summarizing, quoting the episodes. And but we have a lot of cool stuff in store for our what we're calling our victory lap, where we're going to do a couple more episodes where we're talking about like our favorite villains, our favorite cameos, our favorite quotes, and finally we'll cap everything off with our favorite episodes of the whole series. So that's Another Lousy Millennium, ALM Pod on Twitter and Facebook, and ALMpod.com.
That's awesome. Did you guys cover the movies for your series as well?
We did. We went, like, that was when what we call the pre-cancellation seasons, which is seasons 1 through 5. We were still kind of getting our feet into this. We were still kind of figuring it out as far as like what our podcast format was going to be. It was kind of more solidifying. But then when we got to the movies, like that was when our current format really took shape. And so like we went deep into those movies. And that was like one of the first times too that like it was good that me and my brother were recording in separate cities, because like we got into some like really, really intense arguments about some things in Futurama to the point where if we were in the same room, we might have throttled each other. But but it was it was fun. We did all 4 movies and we've now done all the episodes.
Very nice. That's exciting. I mean, make sure to check it out. I guested on an episode. We talked about the water people on a desert planet.
Yes, we talked about really My 3 Sons, the episode from season 1. Yeah. It was a total blast. I said on the show, I hadn't watched Futurama in a while, so it was really nice to actually go back and remember how fantastic that show is. So everyone should go check out the podcast. It's a lot of it's a blast. And make sure to check out the Kickstarter too. We'll have links for everything in the show notes, so make sure you do that. I want to say you can follow me and Brian on Twitter. You can follow Brian at BrianHead. You can follow me at Mike Rappin, and you can follow the show at IRCB Podcast, where I try to post things pretty regularly on Twitter and Instagram. But a man's only got so much time.
This episode first aired on Patreon and is possible because of our wonderful patrons. Join today for exclusive series like the IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, and many more. You can join us there at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. If you haven't already, please go ahead and rate and review our show. I think we've earned 5 stars. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us spread the word about IRCB.
Make sure to join the IRCB Discord community at ircbpodcast.com/Discord, where you can listen to episodes live, hang out with us, chat about comic books, and we do those monthly hangouts, which are a total bunch of fun. We're doing a manga read-along series. We have a monthly book club. We've got a lot of stuff going on over there. It would also help a lot if you tell your friends or your local comic book shop about the show. Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. We can't thank them enough. Make sure to go check out their latest album that dropped, EP 002. It's fantastic from beginning to end. I want to say thanks to Xander for being a wonderful editor and just a fun person to talk to overall. He edits the show and he's just incredible. He makes us sound great. As I said before, thank you, Gabe, so much for being on the show. I want to thank Brian as well for being here. Thank you to everyone on the Discord who is listening live. Cinco and Danny, we really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone out there who listens and shares and talks about stuff with us on the internet about with the show, about comic books in general. We'll really, really appreciate it. So until next time, remember, comics are good, and so are you.